Today's story is about a legendary character, someone whose name still echoes throughout the old American frontier, and also someone who may be a little bit more fact than fiction. Hi, my name is Gabe Bauer, and this is Top Shelf History, where we combine great stories with great drinks. This is the Indiana Pothead. It is the cocktail I've made for you today based on the iconic American folk hero, Johnny Appleseed. It's a sweet concoction made of several ingredients, including apple cider, apple juice, apple jack, frangelico, amaretto, and bourbon. It is a love letter to all things apple and the iconic man who planted them. Growing up, I remember hearing the tale of Johnny Appleseed, the boy who would go around planting apple seeds wherever he went, hoping that they would grow into magnificent trees so that nobody would ever have to go hungry. His humility was shown by his attire, as normally he wore sackcloth or rugged clothing, and of course he had that iconic pot on top of his head. I'm not doing that. That's much better. But you see, Johnny Appleseed wasn't just a legend. No, he was actually based off of a man, and that man's name was John Chapman. Now, there's so much folklore and legend surrounding Chapman's life that it's hard to tell fact from fiction. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through the life and story of John Chapman. I'll present to you my sources in the description down below, and I'll let you decide who really was the man behind the myth. Chapman was born in Leominster, Massachusetts in 1774, and his legendary exploits going throughout America didn't begin, as far as we know, until 1805, when he would leave his family farm in Ohio and travel through the American countryside, mainly in the areas of Pennsylvania and Ohio. He would plant nurseries with seeds that he would gather from cider mills as well. Unlike much of the folklore stemming from the stories about Chapman, he wasn't just a wonder-filled boy planting seeds wherever he came and went. No, he was actually a savvy businessman. What he would do is he'd go to the surrounding areas and look for the best tracts of unclaimed land, and then he would purposely plant each of his apple seeds, and then once he planted them, he would go into the surrounding forest or near the lakes and pick up deadwood or driftwood and create rudimentary fencing to protect his crop. Once the plants started to grow a little bit, he would sell them off to other people or sometimes towns just to make ends meet. And interestingly enough, in the act of him making these pop-up nurseries, he would actually have legal basis for land claims in the future. So by the time that Chapman died in 1845, he had over 1,400 acres of land under his possession. Mind-boggling to think that you plant a couple trees and bam, you have more acres of land, right? But that just happened to be the case. But here's the thing, Chapman didn't trust banks. Now, most of his plants he only sold for about 6.5 cents on average, but he would take all of that money and he'd bury it in the ground instead of putting it in a bank. So with most of his funds being accessible only by the way of the shovel, he would barter for most of his needs, which actually contributes a lot to that rugged look that he had, especially in his legends, because most of the clothes that he wore, he would trade for. That's pretty crazy to think, in my opinion, but it actually is true. Now, today, we see that most apple varieties are limited to only a select few. Things that go into those are, what is their flavors, what are their shapes, what's their textures, and then they're produced at mass just because they're so popular. But John Chapman instead planted a wide variety of different apple species. Some were mushy, some were bitter, some were sour, some were oblong, small, and large, but they were all still apples. Some were even inedible, really, in all honesty. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Gabe, why would anybody buy an apple tree with apples that were practically inedible? Well, remember when I said that John Chapman got all of his apple seeds from cider mills? Yes, that's right, my friends. See, all of these apples, and I do mean all of them, were able to be used in the production of apple cider and apple jack. John Chapman didn't just introduce apples to the Ohio River Valley, he introduced alcohol. And from there, a legend was born. Now you guys have to understand, apple cider was huge back in the day. I mean huge. Because it was lower in alcoholic content, it was considered a pretty safe drink for everybody to enjoy. I mean, also remember, back in the day, water wasn't exactly as clean or as accessible as it is for us now. So apple cider was a safe alternative to have for a drink with your meals. So this was a very common staple in many American households throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Now, after all, let's think about it. Johnny Appleseed bringing appley alcohol to the American frontier. That just sounds too perfect for this show. So, based on that man, that myth, that legend, let's begin constructing our cocktail. Our first ingredient in our drink is that staple of the 19th century American home, 2 ounces of apple cider. So we're gonna pour that in. Now, this is non-alcoholic apple cider, but don't worry, we'll throw plenty of those elements in later. We're gonna follow that up with 2 ounces of organic apple juice. Now this will add a lot more of an appley flavor, a clean appley flavor, without any of those additional spices that you would find in the apple cider. So we'll pour that on in. Again, I use Lakewood. You could probably find these at your grocery store if you're ever interested. They're awesome. Next, we're going to put in 1 ounce of Apple Jack. Now, Apple Jack, at least this one, is around 40% alcohol or 80 proof if you're looking at the bottle. So it's got a big punch. But this particular brand, Captain Applejack, doesn't have a lot in terms of apple flavor. So if you wanted to add a little bit more of an apple flavor to your liquor, then I would probably go with maybe an apple moonshine or a different Applejack brand perhaps, or even Jack Daniel's apple, I think will really work out well here. We're going to next follow that up with 1 ounce of bourbon. I'm using Jim Beam here, and it was a very big bottle with a very small amount of liquid. That's why I'm using this squeeze bottle, if you're wondering. Just for your edification, I suppose. And then next we're going to throw in a 1/2 ounce of amaretto. Now this will actually introduce some nuttiness to our drink and a little bit of sweetness too. And after all, I mean, who doesn't love amaretto? It's so tasty. And then we'll follow that up with Frangelico, which will add much the same, since amaretto is actually a almond liqueur and Frangelico is a hazelnut liqueur. We'll actually get 2 different nut flavors in our drink that will really elevate the flavor profile a lot. So, oh, that's way too much. We'll pour back in some. That's good. There is such a thing as too much of things in any drink, so be careful with how much you pour. And then last but not least, I want to elevate a little bit more spice to our drink and really round out our flavors. So for that, I'm going to toss in a sprinkling of cinnamon. Just tap that on in. And then we will also throw in some nutmeg. This will be really good. Not just towards the aromatics, but also to the flavors as well. We'll top that off, and we are going to shake. Now, we are going to pour this into our Copper Mule glass that is going to be filled to the brim with ice. Now I'm going to use some crushed ice, a little bit of a nicer look. Although you can use regular ice and have it on the rocks. Go all the way to the brim there. That is perfect. Now we will pour. Finally garnish with an apple slice and a stick of cinnamon. And there you have it, the Indiana Pothead. And I gotta say, that is just gorgeous to look at. I mean, it's a beautiful drink in my opinion. It looks so good. All right, I'm gonna just shut up now and drink it. Oh, that is delicious. It's so good. In fact, little trick here, I'm gonna use the cinnamon stick as a straw. It's not the most efficient straw, but it tastes good. That is a fantastic drink, honestly. It's woody from the bourbon, it's nutty from the amaretto and the Frangelico, and most importantly, it is appley. From all 3 of our apple ingredients, the cider, the juice, the Applejack, it tastes so good. And it really is a love letter to the apple, at least in my opinion, for sure. And that bell sounds like last call. So John Chapman and Johnny Appleseed were both known for not just their ability to plant wonderful apple trees and their ability to bring food to the poor and all that stuff, but also because of their faith. One of the most iconic things that we see, not just with John Chapman's character, but also with Johnny Appleseed's character, is that they always carried a Bible with them. And John Chapman's faith was a big part of his life. He was part of the Swedenborgian Church, which was developed by Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a Swedish scientist and Christian, and he developed his own, I guess you could say, denomination of the Christian faith through his beliefs and his writings and aspects of how the world works. So it was a very high-level thinking type of form of Christianity. So the reason why I want to point this out is because a lot of us may think of the folklore behind Johnny Appleseed and how he was kind of this dreamy kid, and I mean dreamy in terms of thought pattern, perhaps not so much in looks, but he was kind of like a dreamer. And we may not always apply to the intelligence of the person when we call people dreamers, but John Chapman was a very smart gentleman. Swedenborgian Church wasn't exactly the easiest to understand, so it took a high level of intelligence to be able to follow through with that faith and be able to show that to other people. But one of the main parts of that faith was unconditional love for all of your fellow human beings. And this was a part that John Chapman exemplified in his character, not only in his business through what he did with planting apple trees, but also in how he talked to other people. It was one of the reasons why he was the most welcome person in the Ohio River Valley. He developed friends not just with the Anglo-Americans, but also with many of the Native Americans as well. His unconditional love was a major part of his character, and it is why I think he has become one of the most iconic American folk heroes, because it wasn't just about apples, it was also about character, and John Chapman exemplifies good character. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to check out some of my other historically inspired drinks, you can check out those videos here, or you can also find them at my website at topshelfhistory.com. There we have also all of our blogs, recipes, and more. From all of us here at Top Shelf History, remember, history is better with a drink.